Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's the Jade Gemini. This afternoon, I am so excited to bring you a review of this watch right here, the SARB017 Alpinist, the green one. Today, I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about some of its features, go over its overall design, and sort of tell you more of a philosophy of this overall watch, as well as a little history. And overall try to answer the question, why is this watch so popular? Now, I do have to kind of state, right, with my reviews, I like to be as unbiased as possible. But this watch is kind of hard to do that, right? But again, like any watch, I'm going to try to be, as like I said, unbiased as possible. But this is my wedding watch. This watch was with me when my first son and my second son was born. This item right here is the most important, irreplaceable item that I own. Let the house burn down, I'm grabbing this. So, that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into this old friend of mine. So the first thing, the Alpinist, let's try and get some size comparisons out of the way. So this is it compared to a watch that, even though it's a little big, it is a little thin, and it's what I'm wearing today. So it is the iconic G-Shock. So the G-Shock is kind of known for having a short lug-to-lug with its case. While this doesn't wear exceptionally long or big, and you have these amazing curved lugs, which will also get into the design with that. Overall, the Alpinist is reasonably thick. It feels a little bit more like a tool watch, but it's not insane. So that's why I think I picked the G-Shock, because kind of the same. It is a tool watch, but it's not insane on the thickness. And overall, you have a case size that is about 39-40 millimeters. I mean, it wears really nicely, really small. Well, sorry, see, I'm already trying to put it on, but so that's kind of that out of the way. Just a really common watch that you're going to find kind of compared to. So the Alpinist. Well, the story of the Alpinist. So in the 1950s and in the 60s, in Japan, the mountain men that would actually climb Mount Fuji, there's a little mountain on the back that I'm trying to show you here. Basically, the mountain men needed a tool watch to be able to be used to climb up, the mountains. So it needed to be robust. It needed to have a sort of, shock-resistant, more durable movement in it, nothing that was fragile. And it needed to have high water resistance as well as high legibility, for night and day. And the Alpinist was born. So the Alpinist here definitely takes on that trend with some amazing features, which is one thing that I absolutely love about it. So it not only is an automatic, and it has the 6R15 movement in this, which ever since I've had has been easily within cost. I think like every day has went by and it's either deviated plus 0.5 to plus 1 seconds. Now it may have changed. The Alpinist is also tough. I was taking care of my toddler, and he was slipping and falling in the bath, and I was putting the bracelet on this, and it slipped off my arm and fell right into the tub. So that's where that little, no, not even that little guy right there comes from. Big old 8 feet drop, not 8 feet, I'm not 8 feet tall, silly. 4 foot drop right from my wrist level, or 3 feet, and took a whacking, and that's all it did. So this is definitely a tough boy for sure, and it still kept that accuracy pretty beautifully, to be honest. So good on G-Shock with the DuraShock. But back to what I was saying, some other cool features is that water resistance is 200 meters. So 200 meters, 20 bar. So with this is going to go ahead and be good to go for any situation you find yourself in. Whether you are trekking through a river like Bear Grylls, right? Or you have to swim across a ravine to rescue somebody, because that's the kind of things you do when you wear an Alpinist. No, or you're washing the dishes and your arm might get wet for a second, right? Or you might be caught in a Florida summer rainstorm, right? That's the real kind of things you're going to find yourself doing with this watch. But anything you run across, you are going to be 100% good to go, because this is better than skin divers even in its water resistance, which I love. To help aid with that, and we'll go over just the movement here really quick, you do have a screw down crown, which just helps with that water resistance. And with your standard Seiko affair, you have a quick change date that's very quick on the first pull out. And then you have a hacking seconds, as well as push forward to go forward, or push up to go forward, and pull back to go back, unlike a lot of movements out there. And then you just screw down the crown. There we go. Got the threading good there. On that beautiful crown as well, one of my favorite features is this signed Seiko S, which is one thing. If you are watching this, they did make a Prospex version of the Seiko. Since we're at the dial and the crown, I'll go ahead and talk about that. But this SARB017, it has the crown, which makes it feel really special, with the S on it, as well as this beautiful automatic script and this bold, DiaShock 23 joules spelt out completely, and 20 bar. Just feels really cool for some reason. Really, I don't know, tooly, but also fancy with that automatic writing. The new version does not come with that on the crown, and it has the Prospex X here, so that is something that people don't like. Also, the dial is a little different on this compared to the new version. The new version is a darker green, while this changes from a sort of emerald, not even an emerald, sorry. I would almost say it's just a dark green that goes into a lime in certain lights. Beautiful Sunburst dial, though. And you have these gold applied indices here, and this beautiful handset, which is one of my favorite parts, with this chapel style hours hand, and you have that syringe, really accurate field watch style. Actually reminds me of the Hamilton khaki that I have. So definitely great there. Really easy legibility during the day. Kind of like a dive watch with this big O hours and all this, amazing Luma bright Loom. Easy to read at night. The only problem with that is the Loom are little dots. There's no sort of like orientation. It's the word I'm looking for. So at night, even last night when I was waking up, I was like, is that 5? Is it 4 o'clock right now? I just don't know, right? And you have to kind of play that guessing game. I have a date window that is a nice black. The new versions actually have a white with a Cyclops magnifier. So just some of the differences that you will find there. The other big thing about this Alpinist, which not every Alpinist has, but this one does, is the internal compass, which is what that second crown is for. So this could go ahead and be used if you are using the sun to orientate your direction. Now for me, what I use it for is like a dive time bezel. I'll take whatever the closest one is. So if it's down here, and I have, it over here, I'll use the south, or like in this case, I'll use the north. Sorry about that, had a rogue sneeze that came out of literally nowhere like a ninja. But anyways, so what I'll do is I'll set this as like a dive time bezel, a timer, right? Which is actually easy to do. You have here separated just like 12 slots around the dial. So you can easily say 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on and so forth, all the way around 60 minutes. So it's a really cool and useful feature. So that's sort of the features out of the way. Let's look at the overall design. We've kind of touched little points, but the S and the Cyclops and all that we've talked about isn't really so much that. So with this watch, with the Alpinist, you get this really nice sort of straightened lugs that has a little bit of curve in on it, but they're also somewhat straight. And you have this beautiful satin that runs here, as well as a polished chamfer along the edges here that breaks it up. And this polish actually leads in on this side to the crown guard, comes back down. On this side, it just goes across the side. You then have a polished bezel around the outside here. When you look at the side, one of my favorite parts, you get this sort of retro 1960s, 50s, sort of feel. Think Speedmaster, where you have this sort of like floating case that's surrounded in. So you can see there's a flat portion right here that goes along the bottom where the screw down back comes in. And then you have this beautiful constant curved area here. And then you also have another break up here. So it's almost like you see the cylinder where the movement is and the dial, and then you have this case surrounding it. And to me, this is something that I love when I'm looking at sort of, again, something like the Speedmaster or some of the skin divers from the 60s. Just a really cool design for sure that is just gorgeous to me. Come over to the other side, you get that same thing where it swoops up proudly to the crown guard and then comes back down with the crown being slightly guarded and nested in the case at the 4 o'clock for the internal rotating compass. Just a really good idea of that satin breaking up that polish. And everything is just done really, really beautifully, really crisp, well executed. Next is the dial. You have at the 12, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 numerals, and then you have just applied indices at the other places other than the 3 where the date is. A nice little touch at the 3, you do have a gold printed wraparound, so it brings some cohesiveness to that. Now this watch to me is strikingly beautiful, again with that handset, the gold and silver. Usually I'm not a gold person when it comes to my watches, but this one, that adds to it for sure. Around the outside, you start getting into a little bit of more of that tool aesthetic with the watch, with these seconds and these little microsecond tracks that run around, and then the white squared out minute markers at the 5, 10, 15, so on and so forth, and that's where your loom is applied as well. And then on the outside again, you have a black chapter ring which rotates, which is your compass. Perfect. So definitely a beautiful design. The strap that comes with this is one of the things that people complain about. It was a sort of faux alligator brown strap that was made out of leather, and it's very, very stiff out of the box and just sort of rudimentary. This is on the SARB, of course. On the newer versions, they come with a much nicer sort of supple leather strap with little tiny stitching on the outside and things like this. Now, to me, this is what really kind of gets into our next conversation, which is our philosophy of use, right? And what I think makes the Alpinist just this complete package, right? Is I have it on the Oyster bracelet here from Strap Code, and I've had this thing for years, and it just definitely held up. It's taken some beatings. There's even a little S here, right at the top, right? But I've come to love that, almost like a little S Seiko or a curve or something. But overall, still, it looks really great. And to me, it just completes this watch in the next phase. To me, this is a classification of watch which I think sports watch has a sort of like business executive feel to it, or casual feel. Well, this is just a little bit more step in the outdoor direction. So that's where I almost personally classify like a 6th or 7th tier or class of watch, other than like, dress and field and pilot and diver and sports. I might be forgetting one. To me, I think there should be an explorer category or outdoors category. And kind of fitting perfectly into that is the sort of brother across the sea from this guy, the Explorer Rolex, right? This, to me, if I had one, right, would sit side by side as the perfect two antithesis. God, that's a word today. Sorry, didn't have my caffeine. But anyways, the perfect two examples of what the sort of explorer category would be. It's this watch is gorgeous, right? With the curves, with the bezel here, with it not being too thick, but still is a tool, you know, sapphire crystal as well, which is an upgrade on Seiko's instead of the instead of their own mineral crystal that they put in. So it definitely is built to take a beating, as we talked about. But it's dressy. You put it on steel, and it just looks more executive and elevated. But if you put this thing on a NATO, right, then all of a sudden it's just a casual watch. You could go out in the woods, right? You could put this on leather, and it really elevate it. Again, this is my wedding watch on steel, right? Maybe a faux pas. Maybe I should have worn leather for an event like that, but I wasn't wearing a tux anyways. I, had like a sort of gingham top blazer. I didn't want it to be all that, I wanted it to just be, me, which I just don't feel like I'm that elevated. Ooh, I'm in a tux, right? It's just not my thing. So anyways, I just kind of feel like this watch, even though it is green, right? And I would probably say, if you say, what's the top 5 green watches? If this isn't number 1, it's definitely in there. But to the point that I was trying to make, this thing is not only a strap monster, even though it has that gold there, it is luxurious, but it is tough. It could be executive if you put it on a bracelet and you could walk into a boardroom and feel confident, right? Have some history as well and heritage on your wrist, some unique features to go in and talk about, usable with the 200-meter water resistance and the very tough movement and case, as well as I think this has a high Gauss as well. Beautiful dial. It is just the do-it-all watch. You could go in and you could go into the woods and, go hiking, bushcrafting, backpacking, and then take this and put it on a leather strap. And you could go to, well, maybe not the opera, right? TGV would probably have me for that and say you have to have a dress watch. But you kind of get my drift, right? This is something that is just a do-it-all perfect watch, and it's unique with that green and stands out. And I think that is why this watch has become the legend that it is and the sought-after item that it is. And it is definitely a reason why sometimes the green doesn't always talk to me, it doesn't always call to me, but when it does, I'm just falling right back in love with this watch and why this was my first goal watch that I ever set for myself, when I was making a goal for myself to, reach that standard. So to me, that is why this is just excellent and why I love it and sort of into why I think everybody else loves it, along with that sort of philosophy of use with the watch overall. It just hits every single category, but is also unique. You don't feel like you're necessarily following the herd with another, black oyster case shaped Rolex, right? And it's definitely got that more traditional look, right? Sort of close to those, but it's definitely still pure Seiko, which to me is the biggest thing, right? Since they are my favorite brand. And I do love Japan so much, so it has that heritage and history with Fuji and everything like that. So that is sort of an overall impressions and thought of the watch itself. The watch itself does also just kind of, again, not to be negative, but, does have its sort of flaws that Seiko does have. I've had this watch for almost, I think, 5 years now, and I just realized that the 12 is not perfectly centered between these two markings here. So that's, a little bit of QC. And of course, you are sort of at the unregulated movement, so you could get super lucky like I did and get the really accurate one, or you could get, unlucky and get one with a, slightly worse misaligned date wheel, or, again, a slightly misaligned handset at the hour when it's at 12, like I did, right? So in this sort of situation, something to kind of keep in mind, and that takes me to the last thing, just to try and be unbiased instead of leaving it at this perfect, happy medium, is the price on these guys and their brothers, which I've been looking at, the 033 SARB, which is a different kind of tier watch, a little bit more dressy, but still, and the 035, is that these watches are becoming really expensive, right? And that does sort of beg the question, does it just make sense to go with the Prospex? For me, there's no sort of question I would go with this, right? Time and time again, but these things are getting really, really high up there in the second market, and some of them are selling way more beat up than mine. That definitely has some love and scratches that I wish it didn't have, and some that I don't mind. So, just something to kind of think of all in all. Again, this is the most priceless thing I own. So, I love it. I don't really have to say more than that. But hopefully through going ahead and watching this, you've had a little bit of sparkle to go ahead and fall in love with this watch as well. And even if you just didn't necessarily understand it before, maybe you now have that appreciation of why people love it so much. So, hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, please go to give a like as well as subscribe, as it helps the channel. I'm taking off the G-Shock. I gotta get this thing back on the wrist. Also, as well, if you did go ahead and enjoy this or have any sort of questions or stories about your Alpinist, either this model or the older or newer ones, please go ahead and leave those below, as I would love to read those. Most importantly, I appreciate you taking time. Yeah, that really says it all, doesn't it? Should have done the wrist shot, because that just really puts it into play. Oof. But anyways, of course, I appreciate you taking time and watching this video here, as there's so many other amazing videos you could be watching, and you've decided to watch this little video right here. Of course, I hope everybody has a great rest of your week. Take care and stay safe. Peace.